Hey everybody, good afternoon. It is Wednesday, June 15th. I'm Andrew Haley, and welcome to another episode of ScreenFlow Live. We today are going to show you how to make cool GIFs with ScreenFlow. There's some new features in ScreenFlow 6. For the past 2 weeks, we've been doing live tutorials on the new features in ScreenFlow 6. Today, I thought we'd dive in a little bit with one of the fun ones, which is making your own GIFs, which is something that people have asked for in ScreenFlow for a long time, and we finally brought it to you. And so today, that's what we're going to cover. I hope that is to everybody's satisfaction. If you have a comment or a question, please leave it on the comments here on the Facebook page. We can bring those in. You can also tweet at us at hashtag ScreenFlowLive. We do check that, but obviously if you're on Facebook, you may just want to use the comments right here, and we'll get those as you post them, and I can answer those live and on the air. You can find us, most of these videos are kept for posterity at facebook.com/ScreenFlow, where you should be now viewing the feed. And that's about it. So if you do have a comment or question, please leave it. We'll get to those as we can. And in the meantime, I'm going to dive in on my desktop here and show you guys how to do some cool GIFs in ScreenFlow. So why don't we pull up my desktop here? And I've got a folder here. I've got a couple things that I've already done in ScreenFlow. So I just want to show you kind of what's possible, and then we'll build our own maybe at the end. So we get a little bit of everything. All right, so the first one that I did was actually a while ago. This was for the ScreenFlow launch. And I'm just going to pull this up. This is a GIF that I created using ScreenFlow 6. And let me minimize it for a second, and I'm going to show you what it actually looks like once it's done. And then we'll kind of dive into the project and show you how we got there. So first one, let's pull this up. So it's kind of fun. You've got this neat little looping GIF. Oh, hold on. Got a neat little looping GIF which repeats itself from the beginning. And again, I'm not going to get too into whether it's GIFs or GIFs. There's some debate on that. I'm just going to call them GIFs for today. Sometimes I switch back and forth and I do GIF. Sometimes I do GIF. For some reason, I don't like GIF as much. I like to say GIF. That may not make any difference to you guys, but that's it. So this animated GIF was a lot of fun to make. It's got several elements, and we've added some of the new animation spring features to the box and to the logo and different things in there. So that was really fun. And this is a little complex, so we can dive into that. And I'll show you how I made that. Another one that we just did recently for today, I think we posted this on social media recently. And actually, let me just make sure. It looks like I've actually got it in a project format, so I'm going to have to show it to you. But we could export it real fast. This one. And it comes down on the screen. And I'll show you how I made each of these, and then we'll dive in and maybe make a new one. All right, so starting with the first one, the present one. This is a little more complex. So maybe I shouldn't start with it. Maybe we should start with the simple one, but what the heck. We'll dive in on this one. Okay, so the first thing you need to know are the elements involved. And how did I start my project? Well, when I opened ScreenFlow, I didn't start a new recording. I just started a new document. So in order to do that, you would, if you go to the configure recording menu, you'll see here, if I scroll in so you can see, instead of hitting the new recording, I went to the new document. And then as far as my dimensions, GIFs are best meant for the web. They're meant to be kept small. So I really choose the web size format when I'm creating a new GIF project. You can try to go bigger than that, and I encourage you to try it, but you may get sizes that are just prohibitive for you. I don't know. Haven't really dived above this. I've found that in generally this size works for me and what I'm doing, but you can certainly branch out and try 720 or larger. I think you're going to get some pretty big file sizes if you start going up too high. anyway, that's what I do. I create a new project using the web format, and that, opens a blank document looking just like this, and you get the 4:3 aspect ratio because that's kind of the web format standard size. Not going to save that. I'm going to close that. So that explains this. 640 by 480 is my canvas size. And then let me bring that up. What are the elements involved? Well, I'm going to turn them off, and we'll turn them back on. Okay, I don't know. Okay, we'll just duplicate it because it's telling me I don't have permission on this file, on this account. I'm just going to close the other one. So we'll work in the duplicate here. All right, pulling this up. Going back to the beginning, let's turn off the elements and start from the bottom and work our way up to the top. All right, so the first element in the project, and if I just drag that up so you can see better, we'll zoom these out a little bit. Can bring this down. Okay, hopefully you can all see that pretty well on the screen. And the first element, I'll just turn it on. This is a new feature, by the way, these little buttons here. You can mute or unmute timeline, stuff in the timeline, which is pretty handy if you want to turn it on or off. The first element is my ScreenFlow logo. And you can't actually see it till it pops out here, but it's got this, it's behind everything else. There it is. And all I've done here is I started by just hiding it underneath the next element, which is my box. Where did I get the box? Well, I found a clip art box on Shutterstock, and then I pulled it into Photoshop, and that's a piece of animated GIFs. You're probably going to be using a photo editing software quite often to get all the pieces you want, because it's rare that you just have everything you want by themselves. You kind of have to do some hunting around to find all the elements you want. But I knew that because we were releasing a surprise or a present, we wanted, ScreenFlow to come out of a present box. So I found a present box. I actually modified it in Photoshop, and I added this stripe on it because I wanted to put a little wrapping paper. It was just a red box, bottom and top. And the other thing I did was I believe I added it twice here. So you can actually see because there was the lid and the bottom, and I don't think I exported them separately from Photoshop. I wanted them to start where they were supposed to be placed. So instead what I did was just crop them. So if I turn off the bottom layer here, you can see this just looks like a lid, but in fact I believe it's the whole box without the stripe. And so you can see right there, I added that, and that's, and I just cropped off the bottom. So now I have really the same box, but I've cropped it into two pieces, into a bottom and a top. And then the same thing on the reverse. With the bottom, I just cropped off, I believe I did that. Let's check this. Oh, this is a nested clip. So it looks like I didn't even add the wrapping paper. Sorry, I'm remembering all this now as I go. I didn't add the wrapping paper in Photoshop. I actually added it in ScreenFlow, and I nested the clip. So all I did was make a little annotation in ScreenFlow that is the wrapping paper. If we turn that off, you can see it doesn't have wrapping paper. And, naturally, it's just the box without any wrapping paper. In ScreenFlow, I was like, I kind of want some wrapping paper. Can I do that? And I just added an annotation on top, which looks nice, I think. So added the wrapping paper, and then nested it. And all it is, honestly, is just the nested clip is like a 5-second timeline with just the box where I've cropped off the top. So there's the top. I cropped that down, and I can reset that. Let's do Command-Shift-Z. Okay. I cropped that off, and then I added an annotation on the top, and then I nested them together so I didn't have to worry about animating them separately. I knew that I just wanted to animate the bottom as one unit, not have to put actions on both the red part of the box and the wrapping paper. So that's when you want to nest a clip, is to pull multiple elements in together and make a single unit out of them. And then you can apply actions or whatever, and it treats all of that as just one unit. Nesting is super handy, especially when adding a lot of actions. All right. Now, next thing we did was we, as I said, we did the same thing. We duplicated just the box bottom, but cropped off everything but the lid part. I even cropped it down so it's very straightforward. And then the final element, so then here's what I did. I just kind of animated it so that, I'm going to turn off the confetti here, which shouldn't actually be showing. We'll make sure we've got all of that showing. Okay, so the confetti should actually not be showing right now. It is muted on the timeline. I'm not sure why it's popping in there. Maybe it's because it's also it's a nested clip. All right, so if I pull these out, you can see, we'll just pull these over here. Actually, and see, I'm gonna grab all of them. Maybe we'll just move these out of the way. Okay, confetti's gonna go over here for a second. And then if I show you without the confetti, here's what it looks like. So I animated it. I have the ScreenFlow icon hidden behind the box. And then in the beginning, I just added an action here where it springs up. And at the same time, I added another action where I just rotated and sprung the lid off, and I just timed them so they started at the same time. And you can see that the ScreenFlow logo one is still going. I made it longer, so it's taking longer, and the lid just pops right off and rocks a couple times. So let's watch that. Okay, and the way that you get that nice rocking animation is you turn a video action into a video motion by checking the effect box here. And I chose the spring effect. And this was a lot of fun because it adds a lot of motion to the animation. Next, I had the box fall away using the gravity effect. And again, at the beginning, I just start their location here. At the end, I pulled them off screen, so they're really just falling below the canvas. And I threw the gravity because I wanted them to kind of fall and rotate a little bit. So I just pulled them off, and there they are, just bouncing around down there off the screen. I even had one where it bounces back up on screen a little bit and then falls off. So there's a couple versions of this, but pulled that off. And then, thanks, Andy. We'll catch you next time. Feel free to watch this when you're done. So that rolls right off and lands there. Now, if you watch this just by itself, it's not bad, right? Pops out, the box falls away. No big deal, right? And then the logo comes forward. Now, we could just throw the logo on that. I'm going to take this off here, zoom out. And if we add the ScreenFlow logo, like words here, then we've got this neat animation. It pops out of the box falls away, and ScreenFlow 6 zooms on. And again, I did a spring animation to spring it from 0 zoom. I just made the scale nothing, so it's invisible. And then I scaled it forward, and it pops back. So everything's really dynamic with the spring effect. It looks really good. Okay? And you can see the spring animation is it's just a short one. And I time the spring animations basically by checking the box here. I check the effect box, and I check the lock to box. And then I just work with the damping and the mass, and then that shortens or lengthens the animation to about the right size and length that I want by using these sliders. When you have and I kind of covered this in an earlier broadcast, so you should go back and watch that, but when you're using a video motion, you basically are turning an action into a motion. And when you apply it into the motion animation, you basically apply an effect. which is an animation effect. And there's 3 different flavors of that. We've got gravity, spring, and pulse, and we'll, I'm sure, add more in the future. But these all look really good. And what they do is they kind of take over and animate effects into your action. So if, a standard video action in ScreenFlow is just, well, in this case, it's take the word ScreenFlow 6 in this text box here and take it from literally being invisibly small, which is 0% scale, and then animate it so that it goes to, looks like 66% scale. So I even made it a little smaller. So 66% scale is the animation. Now, if you just do a standard video action, no big deal. It's going to go from 0 and zoom into 66 and stop. And that's a standard action. In ScreenFlow 6, this new tab, the video motion, allows you to turn that from just an action into an effect. And it applies these physics to that action. So, just what happens in real world, if you go from 0 to 66, as they say, or 0 to 60, if in the car world, if you go from 0 to 60, you're going to have, cars are heavy, they have mass, they have damping, like if you try to stop it on a dime at 60, you're going to either skid to a halt, or if you perfectly stop it, like let's say it hits a wall or something, you're going to get some bounce back and forth. All that has motion, physics, gravity, and ramifications. And so these effects allow you to apply some physics to these objects as if they had real weight and real mass. And it looks really cool. And animates them in, and then you don't have to worry about doing it all yourself by hand, which can take a really long time, or you've got to go into a professional animation tool. So just checking the add effect box really changes the effect of the animation or the video action. And then you can mess with these. As long as you hit the lock to box, it's going to animate as long as it needs to have a mass like that. So if you make the mass heavier, then the animation gets really long because now it's a really heavy object that's trying to slow down. And then if you make the mass really small, it's going to slow down really fast because it's very light. So these sliders have real effects in terms of the time that the animation should take to properly go. And so you're no longer, in my recommendation, that's what happens when you hit the lock to a box. You're no longer resizing. You can't actually resize them in the timeline. When you have that lock to box, it's no longer up to you really how long the animation is. It's up to the mass and the properties you assign to it up in the video motion tab. And that's where you will shorten or lengthen. So I just use those sliders to find the timing that I liked on the word, ScreenFlow 6. And then you get this neat, boom, and it just almost stops right on a dime. It's a very quick, lots of damping, low mass, and some stiffness, and that brings the words to a halt really quickly. I didn't want them like bouncing too much. I thought that the logo should be really bouncy, but the words should be less bouncy and much more solid. Okay, so that's that. And by itself, this animation is good. So this is, not bad, right? But we can add a little pizzazz with it, with this confetti. It's one of the things that, and that's where you can take an animation, I think, and just kind of add the final touch. So when you add the confetti, you get a whole different looking one. And it's like, the confetti explodes out of the box. It looks really good. Now you have a really dynamic animation, and I think that's the final piece of it. So what did I do to make the confetti do what I wanted? Well, the confetti was actually the hardest part of this animation because I just couldn't get it to look right. So the first thing I did was I searched for some clip art confetti that had transparency already on it, so I didn't have to worry about that wherever there wasn't confetti, it would be see-through. That's very important. So all these are PNG files. I brought everything in as a PNG, which preserves the transparency and allows it that, so you don't have to worry about removing the background or anything like that. So I converted everything to PNG in Photoshop if it wasn't already in PNG format. And then brought it in, and you can see I nested it together. So again, so it's just one object and I didn't have to worry about them separately. Now, if I were to delete the nested clip, which if I unnest it, you can kind of see how this works. I'm going to drag this out and we're going to unmute that track. And now what I did was it was you can see one of the confetti clips, they each actually have a different center point. So up here, you can see that this one, I believe it's this one, let's see. So the bottom one here has a center point slightly above the box. And the other one has a center point right kind of in the lid, which is, you know, I guess that's about where I wanted them to originate. Now, the trick was getting them to explode fast enough and then kind of pause, and then I wanted them to fall away. And this is where I really just had to work with the animations and then the curve types. You can see on the curves, I actually have an exponential ease out, so they really slow down. When they explode super fast, it's almost like they're already there. Like when this lid pops off, you can see there's a bunch of confetti. It just explodes everywhere. Now, and it starts out really small, and this is just a zoom effect. So if we go over here, I added a scale. I took them from 0 scale, or negative 141 scale, all the way up to, about, that one's scaled at 70%. This one's scaled also about 70%. And then I had them with different positions. And the confetti clips by themselves, what do they look like? Let's show you that. So I've got confetti 1 and confetti 2. If I bring this down on the timeline, let's do this right here. I zoom out so you can actually see what it looks like. Let's pull this back over here. So confetti 1 in its natural state is quite large. It's actually at 100%, it's a big file. So it's already way bigger than the 640 by 480. And this was because I found this on, again, I think Shutterstock. And the natural size of this clip's really about that large. If we were to scale it down to actually match the canvas, it would look pretty small. The confetti wouldn't be big the way I wanted it to be. So, you know, not very big confetti. So taking it up to 100% is actually kind of nice because you get some really big pieces as well as the small pieces. Maybe not everything's on the screen, but that's okay. And that's why I think my sweet spot was about 70% or so was where I liked the mix of the sizes. And then the other confetti shot, I'll bring that down. The other confetti shot at 100% is, again, it's more of a colored confetti. So there's a red confetti clip and a colored confetti one. And it just adds, it's nice to have the blue and the yellow in there. I wanted colored, but I didn't want, but the problem when you're animating GIFs and things like this is when you have a static image, let's say you just have it fall off the screen. Well, what does it look like? Does it really look like confetti, you know, like is actually moving? It doesn't. It actually just looks like a still image just goes off, right? And confetti doesn't do that. It, you know, it flutters and flips around and all that stuff. So without actually getting into an animation program and doing a particle animation where each piece is tracked and rotated, and which would be incredibly complex. I mean, you can add there's stuff that can make that easier, but you need a really powerful tool like that will animate that. I kind of simulated that by having the two clips together and do slightly different things. So with just one, it doesn't look very good. So let's look at that. We're gonna track that off the screen and just, let's say we blew it up. What would it look like if it just falls? Well, we're going to add that, just an action to it. Oops, wrong one. Add an action to it, and we're going to maybe track it off the screen. So at the end of the action, it'll just fall down. How does that look? Well, let's see. Pretty fast. I'm going to slow that down a little bit, but you know, it kind of looks like confetti's falling because it's so close to the, and then you got this cutoff, this like weird line at the top that just ends. You know, it's not too bad if you just had it raining by, but I was noticing that when it fell off by itself, one didn't look very good. It kind of falls off like that, and I faded it out. That was a big thing, is fading out the confetti so it becomes less of a, you know, it's less distracting by the end of it. We fade this one off. Take this. And that actually had both on there. Let's take this out of there. So it falls off, but it doesn't look very good. You know, you see this line go by as it, and I just didn't like the way that was looking, one by itself. So it's good, but it could be better. It's better with two. One is okay, but it's better with two. So pulling both out, now you've got them kind of moving separately. And I had them each go opposite directions so that they would pass each other going opposite ways. And then when they exploded, I even, again, if they were all going together and they all fell together, it just wouldn't, I don't know, just doesn't feel as much. It kind of looks like a clump of confetti. Somebody just drops it. If it actually, to kind of simulate more dispersion and everything, what I did was, when I exploded them in this particular action, I applied the action to not just the scale. So scale starts at 0. Position goes to about where I wanted it, roughly. So it changes position, and at the scale I wanted it. And then I also applied it to, so then here, so it comes out, explodes, and scale. And then it has to go off screen. And in order to go off screen, I want to simulate kind of the confetti doing, you know, what you would do if you had a lot of confetti on screen. So I dropped it off screen, but I did more than that. I actually rotated it. You can see the property here. I rotated the position in Y rotation space, and I made it a negative rotation. So that means that and if I zoom out here, you can see it starts. The plane of the confetti of the image starts exactly perpendicular, or I should say parallel with the canvas. And then as it falls, it slightly turns, which gives a slight different perspective on the confetti. It kind of squeezes the perspective, distorts the perspective, and it falls off screen. Okay? And that's just the rotation of the Y rotation. Finally, I animate it so the opacity is fading as it's going off. And then on the other confetti clip, I did the exact opposite. So that on this one, I rotated it into the Y positive space. So the two confetti kind of go like this as they fall off. And between that juxtaposition of the fading and the two confetti clips, it made it look more like real confetti. I mean, that's the best I can describe it. I wanted to make it look as real as I could within an animated GIF. So the result is they pop on screen, and the animation of the pop on screen was difficult because I really had to mess with the curve type. I finally found that exponential ease in was what I wanted. I wanted to just boom, like out of nowhere, like someone shot it out of a cannon. The zoom in linear wasn't good. I tried some of the other ones. The new curve type, this is new to ScreenFlow 6, was great for this. It just went boom right on screen. Like it looked really good. So that's the best animation type for this particular animation that I found. And then on the second one, I believe I did just an ease in, ease out. So it just slowly falls off screen and picks up speed as it goes. All right, so the two together, what do they look like? They kind of boom, pop on screen, hold their position, and then the next set of actions kicks in, which is really the fade off. And this is where I eased it in, so they hang on screen a little longer, and then they fall in different directions as they go off, and they rotate a little bit in opposing angles. And I think the result is pretty good once you see it all. So as I said, this was a complex one. It took me a while to kind of figure and configure the way I wanted it. Once I had it, I I did the, I think I just nested them. So I didn't have to worry about them. And then I had, everything came on the way it was supposed to. Okay, that is that's sort of how I did it. Now, exporting. When I exported it, I chose animated GIF from the menu. And then what I did here was I chose animated GIF from the menu. And then I used the scale by 100%. I didn't want to lose anything. I already set it to 640 by 480. I added motion blur, which I think makes a lot of the animations look better. And then I customized this, and I think I kept it at 30 frames per second, and I also did 256. But you should mess around with that a little bit if you get different, if they end up being too large. All right, so that's how you do it. And then you need to, of course, make sure that your GIFs are short. So, chop them if they're too long and so forth. You're going to need to, you don't want your GIFs being, I'd say, more than 5-10 seconds at most. So duration and size are going to be, I think, the largest factors in the size of your export. And that is the ScreenFlow GIF project that I did. All right, so what about the next one that we did? The ScreenFlow the makes cool GIFs. We did this one for today just to show you guys how you can make a cool GIF with ScreenFlow. And you may have seen this on Twitter or Facebook. I think we probably tweeted this out and shared it. This one is a fun one. It's a very simple one to do. So how did I do it? First, I needed my elements again. Again, I was going to use the ScreenFlow logo. That's easy. I have that already ready to go. The text, again, pretty straightforward. I just chose something large and bulky. I usually use Impact as my font. In this one, I don't think I did. I think I just used Helvetica. So, whatever works and looks good enough is easy to read. And then the last piece was I wanted sunglasses. And I did this, again, just a stock image search for sunglasses. And I brought up I brought up these, which was, I believe, in a EPS file for Adobe Illustrator. I'm not too familiar with Adobe Illustrator, so what I did was I brought it into Photoshop, and I really just refined the selection. And even so, you can still see the selection wasn't perfect because it was a JPEG that I pulled in. And anytime you have a JPEG, you're gonna have difficulty with this compression, particularly around edges. So you can see this little white highlight here, and that's a problem. It's if you can get a clean PNG that's high res, that's already got the transparency, go for that every time. Otherwise, you're doing what's called an extraction, and you're gonna get varied results. I don't think GIFs have to be rocket science. You should have fun with them and just go quickly. So for this, it was fine with me. And for this purpose, having a little bit of corniness or some bad cutout actually lends to some of the fun. It makes it seem super, I don't know, just kind of not that serious, right? And I think GIFs in general shouldn't be that serious. So I found the sunglasses. That was no issue once I extracted that in Photoshop. And then the next thing I did here was I needed this hand. And the way this actually got in here was kind of by accident, because I was searching for sunglasses and I found this picture of I actually ended up, this isn't the actual title of the picture, but I just started calling him Cool Guy because he's just so cool, right? He's got his sunglasses, he's got him looking down. And I was like, oh, this is basically what I want to do with the ScreenFlow logo. And his hand is already in the perfect position for adjusting sunglasses. So I just was like, well, all I really need is his hand. And so I grabbed, again, loaded that into Photoshop and just did an extraction around the edge and pulled out the hand. Now, one of the cool things here is I mean, well, again, it's similar to what we were talking about with the sunglasses. You'll notice that it's not perfect, right? If we actually zoom in on this hand, I'm gonna pull this up just a little bit more, and we can actually zoom this in a little bit. I'm gonna move this around the screen. You can see that the edge is pretty choppy. Again, here, this isn't too bad. It's got a little bit of white highlight. I was finding that the extraction had a lot of problems on his palm and places like that. But it took me a little while. Eventually I got it. Over here you can see pieces of his finger kind of chunked off. And his knuckle really disappeared up here. It was hard to find in that particular image. Again, it was just a JPEG, wasn't high res. And there was already a background. This is a natural photo. So extracting people from a real situation, real photo, you're going to have weird different color backgrounds. It can be tricky. You know, it's obviously way better to extract on just a standard same color background. But I used the lasso tool and pulled all of that out and was left with just the hand, which I can pull in here, and I saved it as a PNG on a transparent background. Oh yeah, it's going to do the same thing where I don't, the ownership. So I'll just duplicate this so you can see. Let me pull this on screen for you guys. So I pulled the hand out, and if you look at it, it's that's all it is. It's just a simple hand object, which now I can drag around and do whatever I want with in ScreenFlow, and I can animate. And at that point, it was just a matter of resizing the sunglasses and the hand to be about the same, you know, be together in the same position. So I just lined them up. I just kind of moved this hand around till it was right about on the edge of the sunglasses. And I made the sunglasses about the right size that I wanted. I think from a size perspective, they were gigantic as well. So I actually had to scale them down. At 100%, these sunglasses are huge compared to the 640 by 480. And I think it's the sunglasses too. I actually had two different ones because I think that white halo was just a problem for me. So it took me like to get it right. And you can see even with the sunglasses, I sort of messed up. And we take it down to the, you know, if this at full size, 100%, you can see it's way bigger than the entire canvas. So I just scaled it down, and it looks like it was about 37% was about the right size, 38, 37. And I took the hand and I resized it to fit. And then I took them both together, just selected them both, and I moved them off the screen. And then I just animated them with a quick video action coming on the screen, hand pulling it down. And then I did a snapback action in this case, I didn't want any bouncing. I didn't want any animation. I just wanted to be a straight drop on the sunglasses on the logo and lift them back off. And the nice thing about the snapback action is it instantly did the reverse. So in this particular animation, one thing you can do with GIFs is you can do a loop, right? So the GIFs just keep replaying. So wherever you end the animation, that's where you'll also want to, then it's just going to start back from the beginning. So if you make it end right where it began, then it's going to be a continuous loop, and it's almost as if there's no end to the clip. It doesn't have to reset every time where everybody goes back to the start and then does the action, and there's a jump to back to the beginning. In this case, I just looped it with the snapback action so that it goes right back up, and then it comes right back down. And then, you can see what it would be like just by hitting the space bar over and over again, approximately what it would look like in an actual GIF animation. And the nice thing, again, about the snapback action is it perfectly does the opposite of your actions. And it did it for both. The other cool thing about snapback actions is if I change something, so let's say we wanted to go a little farther, instead wanted to pull this down a little further, like down this far, well, the snapback action actually updates. And I don't have to change anything. It actually keeps track of what I just did in the previous one, which was great. Every time I made an adjustment, I didn't have to make new snapback actions. I didn't have to go back and change the second set of actions. they actually started right where I left off, which I loved that. It saved me a ton of time rather than having to readjust these. So again, if we go back and adjust this again, then, you know, go to about the right distance, the snapback actions should just keep track of that. Boom. Now you are ready to export it. And I recommend doing some timing testing. So we'll save this on the desktop. And I think motion blur I had on. We're going to do, just make sure our frame rate, all that looks good. Let's just export it to the desktop. This is a 1.5 second. So it's going to export with the watermark. I think I need to do a license on here. And it's going to export with the watermark. And let me find it for you guys. Go to my desktop. And hold up here. Where'd it go? Pretty sure I exported to the desktop. Let's try that again. Export. Desktop. And we'll go to, let me do this other. Let's go to, which desktop is the question, right? So we're going to go to this desktop and open there. We'll hit export. That's okay. Okay, there it is. So I think it went to a different desktop, the different user account. All right. So then you can see that this just pulls in and pulls out. And one of the nice things is you just do a timing test. Is it funny? Is the animation too fast? Is it too slow? You won't really get a real sense of it until you actually watch the exported GIF. And I wanted it to come on and pause long enough and then go back up and then start back down. And that is how we made this one. Okay, any questions about that? I can pause there before we dive in and I can actually show you from where do you find the snapback action? Great question. That comes from Tom. So Tom, the snapback actions are, so we can actually start these here and I'll just delete those. So let's say you've just made an animation. I'm at what, 28 seconds there? So let's say you've just made 2 actions, you made some animations, and then on the same clips, starting at, looks like it was at 28 frames, I wanted to create the snapback action. Well, just go up the action menu, add snapback action, and then whichever video clips are selected in the timeline and have actions applied to them, the snapback actions will be created. So the 2 just mirror themselves, pop out, and then I can move them and start them right there. That's where the snapback actions are. And one more time for you, just in case you missed that, you're going to go up to the actions menu. You're going to go to the add snapback action, and then it's going to add the type of action that you have on the clip. I only have video actions applied to those clips at the moment, just the moving them down action. Add the snapback action, and then if we zoom in here, you'll see that just pops them out, and I've got the 2 snapbacks, and it actually should say snapback in the box right there. And boom, should go right back to where they started. Good question. Yeah, no problem, Tom. Any chance of sharing the project files? Yeah, I should be able to share these. We could, let me think how we would do that. We might be able to post them, and maybe we could post a link on in the resources section. We also, I think we'll post these. Yeah, what we'd do is we'd probably load them to a spot on our webpage on telestream.net on our server somewhere, and I would just give you the link to them there. I'll just zip them as files, and you guys can take a look at them. All right, that's kind of the snapback action. I'm going to delete this copy because I'm not actually going to do anything with it. All right, so I thought we'd do one example of how this might work. How would you do this if you were starting from scratch? So I thought a fun one to try would be to animate social media icons onto the screen, because a lot of people go, share, find me on Twitter or Pinterest or whatever. And I found this social media icons picture. I'm going to pull this open. Okay, hold on. They are very difficult when I switch user accounts. All this was on my other user account. So Mac OS gets kind of finicky when I do that. I'm going to do a get info here. I'm going to change the access. Let's just change it to everyone. And we'll go to everyone, read and write. Okay. All right, so I've got this image here where it's basically social media icons. And I thought we could animate these on the screen in kind of a fun way and bring them, make a GIF out of them. So pretty straightforward. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways we might accomplish this. One is to bring them into Photoshop and extract them. Another way to do it, basically we need to get the icons. We need to use them, right? So we need them on their own so we can animate each one individually if we want. We could animate them all as a group, but I think it's more fun if we bring them on individually. Now, you could spend some time hunting, because most of these companies provide their logos online. So you could say, let's do the Pinterest logo. Pinterest logo. And you can find on Google Images, and it's like, there it is. You can grab this one or this one. And the nice thing about them is that they should come in already with transparent backgrounds. So you can get some very high quality ones. If I was doing it myself over time, I would probably do this. I'd probably hunt down a good size one that's good quality as best I can. There's some difficulty with this, for example, is that they may not all be the same size. So this guy might be, looks like it's a vector EPS file. So it's, you'd have to bring in Photoshop. Other ones might be, say, 300 by 300. You're going to get maybe different looks, and you're going to have to match all that up in ScreenFlow, which could take a lot of time. And I don't want to take a ton of time. But the advantage is that you get total control over the size and the look. And you probably are going to get, if you take the time, better results. But, the Facebook logo might be a little different. If you search for those, you're going to find a ton of different ones, and, you might use that. And the nice thing about this is whoever did this original image, they have done a nice job of doing this 3D lighting on all of them. There's consistency. Problem is, of course, is it's a little small, and there's some pixelation and things like that. But doing it all individually, you could do the same thing. However you do it, then you can bring it into Photoshop and extract it. The other way we could do it is we could start with this one and go into Photoshop and try to do an extraction. I don't think that's worth it here, because if we zoom in, you'll see how compressed this already is. You see these artifacts on the screen. This is all JPEG compression, and you're not going to get you're going to run into that problem where you're just not going to get a clean line when you try to pull out the logos in Photoshop. It's going to be tough. So the final way to do it is to kind of do what we did with the present box, which is we can crop it until we can duplicate it multiple times, and we can crop it and then animate the crops. So why don't we try that? All right. I'm going to bring this into a new ScreenFlow project. I'm going to open ScreenFlow. Go to new project. We're going to make a new web one. Pop that in. We're going to go to our media tab over here. You should all know this, your media library. Scroll down. We're going to, you probably can't see that, so I'm going to go a little farther. There we go. I'm going to add media. That's going to pop up my, what I want to open. And I'm going to go into the Make Cool GIFs folder, and I'm going to find the social icons JPEG. I'm going to add it, and it should pop up in my media library right there as a JPEG. So again, JPEGs, if they're already clean, good way to go. But if they're not clean, you probably want PNG with a transparency. That's a better source to use. All right, I'm going to make the screen a little smaller here because we're going to use probably a few tracks here. I'm going to bring this into ScreenFlow onto the track. And then I'm just going to do that again and again. And then I've got, it looks like we have 8. Do that again. I'm going to take all those, copy them, and I'm going to paste them. And then we're going to drag all those. So now we have all 8. Go down until they're the right size. And we're going to drag them over until they all fit. And now we should have 8 tracks, if I counted that right. The other thing we want to do is we want to change our background to be white so it matches the image. So I'm going to go into my crop button over here. That's going to pull up our handy preset pop-up here. And we're going to change the background color from black. Has the color, and we're just going to change it over to match the white, which should just be white, but you never know. Using the eyedropper tool is probably safer. Just don't try to click it too close to a shadow or anything. Hit OK. And now we've got white on white, and it should look as if, you know, where the image ends, the actual canvas background begins. We have a little bit of an aspect ratio issue here, so we may want to grab all of these and resize them so they're about the right size. All right, right about there looks good enough. We could do maybe a little larger. And then we just want to move it around until it centers about where we want them. All right, now now the fun begins. You got to crop. So we're going to use our control key and just crop them maybe from left to right in descending order. So we're going to go crop. We're going to start with Facebook here. Crop it down. You may want to zoom in for this just to make sure you're not getting too much. Let me zoom down here. Okay. All right, that looks like a perfectly good crop. So I think we got that one. Good deal. So let's go to the next one. We're going to do the same thing. We're going to crop over. So hold my control key, click here. We're going to crop this guy. The nice thing is it looks like ScreenFlow is actually just snapping it right to about where I want it. I'm going to zoom out here, crop this one there, and repeat. This is RSS. Or maybe, I think it's RSS or it's Blogspot, which is cool. Google Plus, which is really doesn't exist that much anymore. I think Google threw in the towel on Google Plus. We're going to do Vimeo, which is a great publishing destination for ScreenFlow. A lot of these are. Do Pinterest next. So it's going pretty quickly. It's nice, and the snapping's really helping. It's just going right where I want it. That's great. We'll do LinkedIn next. And finally, Instagram. And just drag that down. And unfortunately, I was really only having to crop 2 sides at a time because the bottom was already so tightly cropped. And now I have all these individual elements that are basically good to go, right? So now we just select them all. And probably what? And they're all individually boxed and linked and everything looks good. And all we need to do now is apply an action. And I'm going to drag the action a little bit out. And again, they're all selected, so they're all tracking the way I kind of want them to track. I like to bring the actions out a little bit, so I don't know, it just gives me some perspective on when the action's about to begin. I can always move them back later, so that's not a problem. And I'm going to zoom out here. And what we want to do is at the start of the action, we want to start them off screen or off the canvas, right? We want them to come into the screen. So start them off the screen. At the end of the action, we want them to fall in. Now together, that's good, but we want to fall in as a group, and we want them to stop there. And that would look, so that's the start of our video action. But obviously, we can do a lot better than that. We're going to come in and we're going to select the Video Motion tab, and we're going to apply an effect. We're going to make gravity. Okay? And now ScreenFlow is going to work a little bit. It's going to apply some gravitas to this. And remember to check the lock to box here. And now we just need to fine tune it. Looks like it's a really long one. We don't want it to be this long. They're all falling in together. They're all doing the same thing. But it's a start. Okay. Maybe we want to decrease the strength. We maybe want to do some squash here. And the elasticity, something like that. We'll check that. How's that look? They actually have some bounce to them, right? Which looks pretty good. And you could do them one by one. So you could kind of have 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, 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 which is stagger them. That's easy to do. Another thing we can do is we can apply some rotation. And this is where you need to start messing with it, right? So we're going to find out what you think looks good. So you might start with, from the bottom and work your way up. However you want to do it, it's kind of your call. You might start with the Facebook one and do some rotation at the beginning. And so to get the rotation the way you want it, we might do some Z rotation. Start it a little rotated. That way it comes in, right? And it's looking like that, which looks not too bad. We might also need to apply that action to rotation if gravity's not working on it. Maybe we want to do a spring rotation on that. Yeah, maybe spring's the way to go with this. Gravity, if you want them to all come in good, maybe you want them all to be spring instead. So we do well, let's just see what it looks like if we stagger them all first. So I'm going to select them one by one. And we're going to drag this over each one step or so. I'm going to deselect the next one, drag those over. Deselect the next one, drag it over. Deselect, and just work my way up. Oh. And then drag that one over. So this is what it looks like staggered. Right? So now they're all falling as a clump, but they're separate. Right? Looking good. And if the rotation on the gravity one is just too much, so maybe we don't want it to rotate quite that much in Z space for Facebook. So we're going to select that one, and we're going to go back to the rotation, which is, that's the wrong one. Oh, it's up one. Ha! There it is. I actually forgot to move that one over, it looks like. So I'm going to move it over just a hair. Okay. And you could even have like one like real straggler, right? So it could come in like way late after the rest. Again, think of them as characters, right? It could be more fun if you do that. So coming into this one, the Z rotation is probably too extreme. Maybe we just want, 30% here. Just a little rotation seems to go a long way, as they say. They say that, right? That's an expression. Okay. So we bring them all in that way. You might, again, play with it a little bit so that they're all just a little skewed on the rotation. They don't all have to start at the same spots. You can just mess. This is where the individuality comes in. You know, just doesn't. There's no rhyme or reason. You're gonna just tweak it and feel like what feels good. You know, they can all, one can actually come in almost already just normal with no rotation. Let's do this guy. All right, and then maybe we'll leave Instagram will be the normal one. So let's zoom that in and see how that looks. So it looks like it stayed with the rotation, and we don't want that, right? We want it to come back to 0 at the end. So we're gonna just go back to each one. We'll actually select all of them, and then at this point we want the rotation to go back to 0. Okay, let's try that again. Hit OK. Discard change. Okay. Discard change. All right. Discard change. Discard change. I may have messed up by trying to do that. Oh, I see what's happening. Let's go back to 0 here. There we go. I just had the degree in the wrong side of the 0. Looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. The one thing with the rotation you'll notice is, and the squash, anytime you mess with that, it's going to bring the clipping into view. So that's the one downside of this type. Maybe you can't get too crazy with the animations because you have this with the cropping, you have these white boxes that nobody can technically see unless that they transgress onto the boundary of another image. So this is where working with the original transparent PNG logo where it's perfectly ends at the right spot is probably an advantage because you don't get this problem. You don't have this like white crop here. So you can do more fun stuff and you don't get this kind of, it's so fast that, unless someone's stepping through it, it's hard to notice. But, the eye kind of catches that something's going on. And that's really with the squash. We could turn the squash off. I like the squash. It really is cool, but maybe it's not going to work for us in this case. So selecting all of them, starting here. And then going there, select the last one. Maybe we turn off the squash. Which, I'll be sad about it, but we can fix, you can always go back and fix that if you have the right, maybe we'll just try lowering it. Maybe just very little squash. A lot better. Not quite as fun, but Facebook comes in there at the end and just, you've got some white border on border stuff there, but honestly, it doesn't look too bad. And there you have it. You've got basically made your own animated GIF, and it's about 2 seconds. We could chop it like right there if you like. It's not gonna loop, so you may want to cut it after that. This may actually be better as a if you're gonna like bring it on a website or something and you want it them to stay on the screen so that maybe after it plays once, then they stay and it gets replaced with an image file or something. Or maybe you just keep it the same for the rest of the time and then it falls back on. I don't know. You're gonna have to decide on how big or how much you want it to go to do that. But let's say we make it 5 seconds and let's export it. See what the size is. So we'll go to animated GIF. We're going to customize. That looks okay. We're going to go to 100%. We're going to use motion blur, and then we'll call it social media. and put it on the desktop. That's okay for now. And it's going to export. Let's see how large this guy is. So checking out the size here, it looks like it's about 7 or 8 megabytes, which is pretty big. I like to try to keep them 5 or under, 3 or under. So the nice thing about it is it hangs out on the screen for a long time and doesn't just re-loop until about 5 seconds in. But it looks really good. That's when you add, you definitely see some of the cropping. So if I was going to do this right, I guess I would go back and use the individual PNGs so I could really play with the bounce and the squash and all that and really make it a little more fun. But for just a few minutes effort, you get a really good result there. 7 megabytes, if we're trying to make this smaller, we would move everything back. Let's maybe start it a little sooner. And then we'd chop it maybe just after the 2 seconds mark. Okay, let's try 2.5. So we'll hit our T key, and then we'll select everything and delete them. And now we've really shortened the length. I mean, the animation's the same, but then it's just going to restart. So that the GIF will keep looping a lot faster. Hit save, re-export. Didn't save the project. This is a big no-no. Definitely if you're working on something, save early and often. If I am working on something like this, I do that almost religiously, but with demos, I don't do it as much. So we're going to, instead of writing save, I'm going to say social media icons. And we'll export that to the desktop, and then check it out. See how our size has changed. That's all looking good. And I might call this A, so I have different versions if I don't want to overwrite. Okay. How does that look? What's the size difference? So 3.4, that cut it in half. So a lot better size. But of course it's shorter. And that is making an animated GIF. Hey, Ben. Good to see you there, bud. All right, folks. That is making cool animated GIFs with ScreenFlow. And why is it not possible to move the rotation handle from the center of an object to another point? Workaround. So you mean... so each of these objects does have its own rotation. So if I copy or paste that, let's say we do this one. Bring that in here. And if I'm a little unclear on your question there, Holger. If you want to know how does this, if I reset the position here, scale, 100% position, make it 0 and 0. All right, so the rotation handle, each of these has a handle here that lets you rotate them. So you could use this to rotate it. But I'm wondering, you're wondering, an object can only rotate around its center point. Oh, are you wondering, like, I see what you're saying. You'd like to say rotate it if we moved that to another spot. Workaround for that. Here is what I might try if I was you. I would try this. I would move it to, say, the corner. I'm just going to reset that to 0. So just rotate it. Say, use this as, and this may not work. I'm just going to try this. Then we'll have to test this. But imagine the center point of the canvas as your the center point you want to move to. So let's say we wanted to rotate around this left corner. We might adjust it so it's just off center from the center point of the canvas. And then we would add a second object of some kind. Doesn't really matter what it is. We could even duplicate this. So we're going to copy and paste it. I'm just going to paste it here. All right, so we have the same one, right? But now what's cool is we can nest them. Okay, and now you have a nested clip. And now rotating this one should work if we rotate it around a different spot. Now we're rotating off that center, that left point. And even though everything's still transparent, you can get some different rotations on this new plane. Yep, combining layers. Does that make sense? There may be another way to move the center point of an object, but I'm not aware of it, if there is. That would be my workaround, is rotating around that. Hope that answers your question. All right, you guys. Any other questions while I'm available? We are not going to have a broadcast next week. I will be on vacation, so we are not having a broadcast for either ScreenFlow or Wirecast, but we will resume the following week, same time, Wednesdays 2:30 for ScreenFlow, and Thursdays 2:30 p.m. Pacific time zone for Wirecast. And tune in tomorrow at 2:30. We're interviewing Paul Richards from PTZ Optics, and we're going to be talking all about cameras, which is really exciting. So hope you guys can join us. And I'm glad that answered your question, Holger. And yes, it dies. No, it does. Yeah, I get typos all the time, so it's no worries. All right, hope that answers everything, and hope that was helpful. That is Making Cool GIFs in ScreenFlow. I'm Andrew Haley. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. We'll see you in 2 weeks.